Everything documented in the Bible serves a purpose. Be it events, places, incidents or specific teachings or instructions and prophecies, all, if carefully meditated upon, offer powerful life lessons or warnings. One of the documented life scenario I learned some powerful lessons from is that of the life journey of the children of Israel, especially from the period they lived in Egypt up to the time they journeyed in the wilderness. Specifically, how the two locations represent two completely different paradigms of life. Foremost, let us look at the background story. One of Israel's sons called Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. They sold him to some merchants, who subsequently sold him as a slave in Egypt. They did so because they hated him. Little did they know, God had allowed that to happen, for his good purpose. For years later, there was a global famine, save in the land of Egypt. Egypt was not affected by the famine because God had given Joseph wisdom to make the necessary preparations before the famine hit. God did that by giving King Pharaoh some dreams which troubled him to the core, the frustrating thing being that he did not know the interpretation. Therefore he summoned his elites, but they could not interpret the dreams. It wasn't until Joseph, who at the time was in prison, due to further betrayal, was summoned to interpret the dreams. He through the revelation of God interpreted the dreams. They were dreams warning of the impending famine. There was going to be 7 years of plenteous harvest, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Joseph further offered wise counsel regarding how the nation should prepare for the famine. The king was impressed with both the interpretation and the subsequent advice, and therefore promoted Joseph to be the chief governor of the entire Egypt. Thus Joseph became the second in command. Moreover, he was assigned the role to strategize for the impending famine. Therefore he built plenty storehouses and collected plenty grains. That was the grain that saved not only the nation of Egypt, but the whole globe. For people traveled from all over the world to buy the grains. The brothers, who had sold and forgotten about him, happened to be amongst those who went to buy the grains. Of course, they did not recognize him, because of the authority he commanded and because he spoke the Egyptian language well. It wasn't until Joseph disclosed himself that they were shocked to the core. They asked for forgiveness and he forgave them. Thereafter, Joseph facilitated the relocation of his entire household to Egypt, to a fertile location called Goshen. There, they multiplied and became a mighty nation, a development that threatened the king in office. Many generations later, the king knew nothing about Joseph and therefore saw it fit to oppress his descendants. Foremost, he assigned some midwives to kill all the Hebrew boys at birth. When the plan failed, he allocated some taskmasters to enslave every Hebrew. He instructed his Egyptian taskmasters to expose them to hard labor in the fields and bricklaying workforce. They suffered to the point of shedding tears, and God heard their cry. In response, God sent his messengers to deliver them. Moses and Aaron reported to King Pharaoh, to inform him of God's instruction to release the people, but Pharaoh refused. Then there was a back and forth of miracles, signs and wonders, but Pharaoh kept hardening his heart, until God humbled him to the point of letting go of the people. But he soon regretted why he complied, and therefore resorted to pursuing them as God led them to the promised land. He got on his chariots and caught up with them by the Red Sea, where God ended up drowning him. That was his demise and the beginning of a new chapter for the Hebrews. They proceeded to the promised land through the wilderness, with God amongst them, guiding them by the pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. All they needed was to simply follow. Whilst in the wilderness, God also introduced them to his laws and ways. Moreover, he showed them his glorious side when they reached Mount Sinai. He changed their diet and met their needs. Looking back from where this part of their life story started, we can tell that Egypt was meant to be the breadbasket, but it ended up a place of enslavement, just as is the case with our world. For God created this world so that humanity may enjoy life and everything he created. He specifically said, "Subdue, replenish, multiply and have dominion," but the devil usurped the plan. He made himself the god of the world, whose rulership thrives on enslaving people. He enslaves humanity because he hates seeing us enjoying the God-given freedom and goodies. Thus, he enslaves humanity through sin, infirmities and all kinds of bondages. But the good news is that God sent his Son Jesus Christ to deliver us from the hand of the devil and his bondages, just as represented by what Moses and Aaron did. However, in some circumstances, the devil may attempt to block the deliverance process, just as Pharaoh did. For deliverance entails coming out of any particular bondage or sinful habit as represented by the literal departing from the land of Egypt. In other words, the only way to tell whether deliverance, say from gluttony, or from obscenity has taken place, is when one is free from such practices. Subsequently, they should be able to control the strong cravings for food, or the utterance of dirty language. The same applies with everything, and then we can say one has been delivered. The Hebrews were taken to the promised land through the wilderness. It was an isolated place where they journeyed with God, free from the slavery or any other human interferences, reflecting how when served, one becomes set apart for God. That is, God takes over the governance. Another important thing I learnt is that the Hebrews still met challenges related to the wilderness nature, lack of water being the main one, but God intervened in his miraculous ways, implying a delivered person is not exempted from the challenges of this life. The difference is that God is by his side to deliver him from them all. I also learned from what took place in the wilderness that loyalty to God is paramount, or else one will not reach the promised land. Amen and Amen.